Man decided to file for divorce after he took a closer look at this photo. It's crazy. How could she ever do this to me? What did I do wrong to deserve this? These questions raged in David's head. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw a new photo his wife Sarah had just sent him. She had just sent him a photo which she believed was just a normal photo of herself in a new outfit, but it turned out to be a huge mistake because his partner David looked at the photo better than she expected. He was furious when he saw a small, but very important detail: everything in their lives would change. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button and click the notification bell. Let's proceed with the video. David hung up the phone at the hotel. He could barely believe what they had just told him. He now had no doubt that Sarah had been lying to him for the past couple of months. But what exactly had she been hiding from him? He decides he has to message her. He doesn't want her to figure out what he knows and tries to sound as normal as possible with his message: "Hey sweetie, what are you up to?" After a couple of minutes, he gets a reaction. "Nothing much, just working." David knows she is lying, but how could he prove it? Maybe with a picture. 15 minutes later, he gets what he asked for. After inspecting the photos closely, he has no doubts anymore. David filed for divorce that very next morning, and it would be finalized less than a month later. But what did David notice in these pictures that could upset him so much? To better understand this, a bit of backstory is required. Sarah and David are a young couple living together in LA. They have been together for almost 3 years, and for 2 of those years, they have even been married. At first glance, they seem like a normal, happy family like any other, but they actually have a lot of noteworthy history that would make the majority of people raise an eyebrow. When Sarah was young, she still had big educational ambitions, but she'd soon find out that this probably wasn't meant for her. Sarah wasn't very good at school and didn't enjoy it either. She also didn't have too many friends, but despite that, a particular group took a big interest in her, and that the boys at the school. Sarah is a very attractive girl, and the guys could simply not keep their eyes off her. They would do anything for her, and Sarah got very good at using this to her advantage. She greatly enjoyed all the attention, and in a way, she almost became addicted to it. It made her feel a certain way that nothing else could replicate. When Sarah got older, the attention she was getting seemed to fade out a little. A lot of guys got into relationships or moved their interests elsewhere, and Sarah was left behind. She was now left in a predicament because she had to start taking control of her own life now, and without any particular skill, this was difficult. She decided to resort to what she knew, and that was trying to bank on her looks to get what she wanted, which in this case was an income. Sarah had dropped out of school, seeing as graduating felt almost impossible to her, and she needed an income to prove to her parents she would be fine in life. But her options were very limited at this time. She eventually decided to try her hand at some modeling work, and Sarah's immediately felt right at home in this profession. She barely needed any academic knowledge or skills. All she needed to do was follow the instructions and look pretty. It seemed like a dream job in her eyes, but while Sarah herself was extremely happy with her modeling work, her parents were less supportive. They liked that she was earning money, but they were of the opinion that she was not learning any skill, and if her looks when she would have nothing to fall back on. This led to many arguments between them, and at some point, Sarah just felt like the situation at home had worsened to a point that she could no longer stay there. But she had no place else to go. At least, not until a very special person came into her life. Sarah had been hired to work on a big budget production, the biggest of her career. She had to show up a week prior to all the photo shoots to talk everything through with the organizers. At this point, all the sets were still being built by workers, and one of them caught Sarah's attention. The name of this worker was David. He was a carpenter by trade, only a couple years older than Sarah, and was her to build one of the sets for the big photo shoot. This was a job that would at least take another week to complete, and Sarah was determined to use every second to her advantage. Sarah was very interested in David, and he quickly developed similar feelings towards her. The pair really hit it off during the week and exchanged numbers when David's job was done. In the months following this, Sarah and David talked almost daily and met up very often. They both felt like something special was happening. The pair had fallen head over heels in love with each other and knew that they were meant to be together. David was very eager for Sarah to move in with him, and Sarah wanted nothing more. But as she would soon find out, David had a big condition Sarah would need to abide by for them to continue on their journey together. David was not a fan of the work Sarah did at all. Before he was willing to fully open his heart and his house to her, he needed Sarah to quit her job as a model. He did not want to share her looks with anybody else. Sarah was very much caught off guard by this demand. She expected David to be very much accepting of her profession because she had met him on a photo shoot. But this apparently could not be further from the truth. Sarah immediately got flashbacks to the situation with her parents, and suddenly her head was filled with doubt. She had to think about this decision long and hard. Sarah didn't want to give up a job that she enjoyed so much and felt like she was very good at as well. But the love she felt for David was so strong. Was she ready to risk everything for somebody she only met a couple months ago? The more Sarah thought about it, the more she leaned in one direction, and soon after, her decision was made. The love she felt for David was too strong to ignore, and thus she decided to give up her job and move in with him. She really believed he was the love of her life at that time and was also confident in herself that she would quickly be able to find another job. But this would turn out to be a lot more difficult than expected. The first year of Sarah and David's relationship did feel like a fairy tale. The pair spent as much time together as possible, and by the day, they became more and more sure that they were truly meant for each other. And still, very much high on their pink cloud, the couple made a very big decision. They decided that they wanted to get married. And as soon as possible nonetheless. They managed to put together a big wedding with lots of guests. It was a day of pure joy and happiness, and what Sarah had dreamed about since she was just a little girl. But that dream would come at a cost, a literal cost, because the couple blew almost all of their savings on the extravagant wedding. Tearing in on David's savings had become a common trend for the newlyweds over the past year. Sarah still had not found a job yet, and David's carpenter's salary was proving to not be enough to support them. It became clear that Sarah had to find a job again, and quickly. With the pair having barely any money left to support their basic needs, they also needed to keep paying for their rent, otherwise, they would be kicked out of their house and end up on the streets, and potentially lose everything they have. At first, Sarah was fairly excited about getting a job again. She missed working as a model and feeling productive in general. She had been relying on David for a long time and never quite liked how this made her feel. She was ready to get some independence back again. Sarah applied for a couple of jobs that interested her and was confident that she would have found her dream job in no time. But the more time that passed, the more Sarah began to realize that she might have been overconfident about her chances, and she was confronted by a grim reality. Sarah got turned down for almost anything she applied for. And the more jobs she tried to get, the less she actually wanted these positions. From office manager to supermarket employee, she tried it all. But Sarah was always met with the same response after a potential employer had taken a look at her CV. She neither had the experience nor the education level employers were looking for. A quick Google search would also immediately reveal some often less than appropriate pictures for employment other than as a model. And that was precisely the thing that David did not want her to be doing anymore. Sarah was starting to feel more and more ashamed. Ashamed that she was seemingly unable to find an appropriate job, and ashamed that she was thus not able to help support David's income. She knew how hard he was working to bring money into the house and felt guilty for not contributing. This process of applying for any job she could find and getting rejected time and time again went on for at least 2 months. And with the couple now barely having a penny left, Sarah felt like she had no choice anymore. There was only one thing she was truly good at, and she needed to start making money now. Sarah told David that she had finally found a job and that it was as an evening/night employee for a local hotel. She never wanted to have to lie to David, but Sarah knew that he would never accept her new job if he knew what it was. And the couple was in no financial position to wait any longer to earn more money. Even though David didn't know what Sarah was really doing to earn money, he still was not even that happy with the fake job she convinced him she was doing. Mainly because Sarah working evenings and nights meant they would spend a lot less time with each other. But Sarah told him she didn't have a choice. David could not physically work more than he was already doing, and their financial situation was starting to look direr by the day. David just hoped that the irregular house would only be temporary. Sarah told him she hoped so as well, but already knew that this was not the case. In the month that followed, Sarah was able to hide her real job from David. She got more and more confident that she was getting away with it. But what Sarah didn't know was that David had started picking up on some things and had started to have some doubts about what was going on. The first sign regarded the money Sarah was making. Her salary was being deposited directly into their shared bank account, and those amounts didn't strike David as odd. But Sarah told him that she also made some money from tips, and David had told her that she could keep that money for herself. Not realizing how much it actually was. David never really asked Sarah how much she was making in tips, but he did start to wonder more and more as time was passing. Mainly because Sarah was frequently starting to come home with some seemingly very expensive items that David could not imagine one would be able to pay for just with hotel tips alone. David had seen new handbags, coats, makeup, sunglasses, and much more being brought into the house with the explanation that Sarah had paid for it with her tip money. David didn't know much about these items and their exact prices, but he recognized the brand and knew that if someone like him could do that, it would have to be very expensive. But even though David had questions about all this, he did not want to confront Sarah with his doubts and worries. At least, not yet. He had no evidence of anything, and her working again had really helped them out financially. But David would soon find the evidence he was looking for. With David now starting to have some suspicions, he became a lot more suspicious of what Sarah was doing when she wasn't with him, and other things besides the expensive items Sarah was bringing home started to stand out to him. And everything that caught his attention was making him more worried. One thing David found odd was that Sarah had brought home a very cute and sexy outfit. It was somewhat similar to what she wore when they first met in her modeling days. David absolutely loved to see her in this new outfit, but after a few times of wearing it, he never saw her in it again. David was wondering why this was, seeing as he had expressed how much he liked it multiple times. But when he was doing laundry on a night that Sarah was working, he noticed that the outfit was not even in the closet at all. She would not have thrown it away already, right? Or was she keeping it somewhere else? Something else that struck David as odd was that Sarah seemed to be decreasingly interested in them undertaking romantic things together or even being intimate at all. This had never been the case before Sarah had started working, and not even when their financial stress had made them almost unable to do anything else than worry. Sarah herself tried to blame her being tired from work for this change, but David didn't buy it. It was a convenient and easy explanation in his eyes, and his paranoia had already put him way past the point of accepting an excuse like that. Was she maybe getting it from somebody else? Could Sarah really be cheating on him from that moment on? It seemed like David's worries were really starting to get the better of him. The fear of Sarah cheating on him with another man did not leave his mind. The more he thought about it, the more it took shape, and the more it made sense with everything else that he was noticing. What if she was not just dating another man, but some sort of sugar daddy? Somebody who would be able to pay for not only the expensive items Sarah kept bringing home, but also her salary to make it look like she was working while she was actually spending time with him. And it would also explain where the sexy outfit went. David knew that all he had were speculations and that he was lacking any substantial evidence to prove that Sarah was cheating on him with a sugar daddy or something else. Maybe something worse. One night when Sarah was at work, he simply could not control himself anymore. David just had to talk to Sarah about all his worries, suspicions, and feelings before their problems would be beyond repair. He first tried her cell phone, which she almost always answered, but Sarah didn't pick up. So David decides he would call the hotel Sarah works at. But he didn't know he would be in for a big shock. After a couple of rings, David gets connected to the front desk of the hotel in question. He tries to politely greet them and then quickly asks if they can put Sarah on the phone. His question is met with a confused-sounding voice on the other side, asking for a moment to allow her to check something. David is being held on hold for about 5 minutes, which gives him time to think. What was he doing? He was letting his paranoia completely take control of him. Sarah would never do something like this to him. But then the voice on the other line returned with a devastating message. The front desk employee checked their company record, and there was no Sarah working there that evening. She had even called around to all the supervisors that were present, but none of them had a Sarah on their roster. They had found that nobody by that name had ever worked at the hotel. When those words left the lips of the woman on the other side of the line, David felt his whole world collapse in on itself at that very moment, and suddenly all the worst-case scenarios that he had been pushing to the back of his mind started to come back to the forefront again. David hung up the phone with the hotel without saying another word. He stood there with the horn in his hand unmoved for a solid 15 minutes, contemplating what he should do now. He knew he needed a plan that was not solely led by his current emotions and tried to calm down. He knew that Sarah had been lying to him about her job, and he now had the evidence to prove that. But what else had she been lying about? He still did not know what was going on with her exactly. Where did she spend the time she wasn't spending at the hotel? He only had his speculations still stuck in deep thought. David felt his phone vibrate briefly in his hand and looked at the lit-up screen. It was a text from Sarah. She apologizes for missing his call and asks him what's up. Every fiber in David's body wants to tell Sarah everything he knows, but he controls himself. David is afraid that if he were to confront Sarah with everything, she might not be honest about what she has been hiding from him and make up another excuse that he could not disprove. He needs to find it out himself first, otherwise, his mind will never be at rest again. He texts Sarah back that he just called because he misses her and that he was feeling lonely. He had done that a couple times before that month and thus knew that it would not raise any suspicions. Sarah reacts compassionately and asks if there is anything she could do. Exactly what David was hoping for. David asks Sarah if she could maybe send him a photo of her that he could look at till she gets home. He had already seen every photo he had of her about 1,000,000 times. This time it takes Sarah almost 20 minutes to respond after having seen the text. But then the pictures appear. 3 photos appear of Sarah seeming wearing clothes that would not seem out of place on hotel staff, and even the room Sarah was in seemed like a hotel room. But David knew she had been lying about the hotel and thus inspected the photos closely for any shred of evidence supporting his suspicions. And then he saw it after closely inspecting the pictures that Sarah had obviously tried her hardest to make it look as inconspicuous as possible. David spotted that Sarah was not wearing her wedding ring in any of the pictures. David cannot believe it, but he knows there could only be one explanation for this. Sarah has to be cheating on him. There are no other explanations for her taking the wedding ring off. With his hands shaking from rage, David sends a thank you to Sarah and puts his phone away. This is not something he is going to discuss over the phone, and he will wait to confront her in person. David is feeling heartbroken. How could she do this to him? After all he had done for her and all they had gone through together? Deep down, David knows he still loves Sarah, but cheating is something unforgivable to him. He quickly has his mind made up. He will file for divorce in the morning. Sarah won't be home till very late that night, but David knows that he will not be able to sleep anyway and decides to stay up until she returns. He just wants to confront Sarah with what he has discovered and his decision to leave her. He waits for hours until he finally hears the front door unlock. It is about 3 o'clock in the night when Sarah finally comes home. She is exhausted from the night she had and wonders how much longer she will be able to keep this up. But she knows that she has to, cause they are still not back on their feet. She just wishes that she could use all the money she was earning without David getting suspicious. When Sarah opens the front door, she is surprised to find the light in the living room still being on, and even more surprised that David is still sitting there instead of being asleep. He was always in bed by this time, as he would have work early in the morning the next day. Sarah's first thought is that he probably missed her so much he waited up for her, judging by the texts he had sent the evening just past. A thought that puts a smile on her face. But when Sarah looks into David's bloodshot eyes, she knows something has to be very wrong. David starts yelling at her, screaming even. All the emotion he has had bottled up for so long is coming out, and there is no stopping it. He wants to tell her everything he knows. It takes a while for him to calm down, but when he does, Sarah can finally get a word in an attempt to explain herself. With tears in her eyes, Sarah tells him that she has not been cheating on him with anybody. Yes, she had lied to him about working at the hotel, but that was only because she was afraid and ashamed to tell him what she was actually doing. But she was left without a choice now and had to admit it to David against his wishes. She had started working as a model again. She wanted to only do this for a short time to make some extra money, but she had quickly fallen back in love with it, and she was also getting paid very well. Mainly because she was doing some very special shoots. She was doing a lot of night shoots. A lot of photographers wanted to do shoots at night, and not a lot of models were willing to work day and night. Sarah had quickly built up a reputation as somebody who was willing to, and so she got booked a lot. This also meant that she could ask for good money for her services for some of the shoots. She would have to take off her wedding ring that at last night's shoot this was also the case. The sexy outfit was also part of a modeling job, and she had to give it back afterwards. And with the late night of working, Sarah just felt too exhausted to be intimate with David. Now that everything was out in the open, David had a long and difficult talk about the situation and how to move forward with this. And there was one aspect that heavily dominated the talks and would eventually also decide the outcome. Sarah did not want to stop modeling again for David. This, alongside the fact that she had lied to him about it for so long, made David decide that he wanted to divorce Sarah. He still loved her and she him, but this was not a situation in which he wanted to stay. He contacted his lawyer that very next morning. And from that moment on everything went really fast. They were divorced less than a month later and both moved on with their lives. Luckily they still managed to remain friends despite everything, and both quickly made peace with the new situation. They both realized that it was simply better this way. By now, they are both in a new and happy relationship. Sarah is still modeling as well, but doing a lot less evening work as she is more established as a recognized talent. She and David still talk and even go out to dinner sometimes, but only as friends. What did you think of this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video and subscribe. See you next time.